Furious, I sped to my wife's lover's house, intent on confronting him. As the door opened, his face turned pale, and he moved to shut it. I kicked it open. What I saw inside froze me to the core, a nightmare that sent my world spiraling. My fists reacted before my mind could, knocking him out cold. In shock, I called the police. The first crack in my seemingly perfect life appeared on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday evening. Helena, my wife of 11 years, breezed into our Prague apartment, cheeks flushed from the cold, her perfume lingering like a ghost. She kissed me in passing, her attention flicking to her phone, which buzzed insistently from her pocket. I dismissed it initially. Her job as an event planner for Prague's elite often demanded unpredictable hours and constant communication. She thrived in chaos, her energy infectious. But lately, that energy felt misplaced, as if part of her existed in a world where I didn't belong. Little things gnawed at me. The late-night showers, whispered phone calls, and lingerie I'd never seen her wear at home. I brushed off the doubts. As an architect with long hours, I knew stress could blur perception. Then I found the bracelet. It was nestled in the glove compartment of her car, a delicate gold chain with a heart-shaped charm in a velvet box. My first thought was warmth. It must be a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. But when the day passed without mention of it, unease took root. Helena's behavior only deepened my suspicion. She left earlier for work, returned later, and her phone, once casually left lying around, was always in her hand or hidden away. One evening, during a movie, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She snatched it up so quickly I flinched. "Work," she muttered, her eyes flicking to mine before returning to the screen. Her hand trembled slightly, her smile didn't reach her eyes. By then, I couldn't ignore the signs. Something was terribly wrong. The tipping point came one Thursday night. Helena was in the shower and her phone was charging on the nightstand. I hesitated, battling guilt and suspicion, but when the screen lit up with a message preview, my heart stopped. "Miss you already, gorgeous. Friday can't come soon enough. Martin." The name struck me. Martin Sakura. Helena had mentioned him before, a wealthy client planning high-profile events. "Exhausting," she'd said with a laugh. But there was no frustration in this message, only intimacy. Shaken, I replaced the phone and left the room. When Helena emerged, towel wrapped around her hair, I greeted her with forced casualness. She didn't notice the tension in my voice. The next few days, I pieced the puzzle together. Martin, a flashy entrepreneur with a taste for extravagance, demanded Helena's time. But the texts made it clear their relationship went beyond business. On Friday evening, Helena dressed impeccably, sleek black dress, high heels, and red lipstick. "Client dinner," she said, avoiding my gaze. She kissed me goodbye, and as soon as she left, I grabbed my car keys and followed her. Through Prague's cobblestone streets, I tailed her silver car, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. She pulled into the driveway of a sprawling villa on the city's outskirts, a gleaming monument of glass and steel. From my car, I watched her approach the door. Martin greeted her with a grin, his hand lingering on her back as he led her inside. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I sat there, reeling, anger and disbelief churning inside me. The next evening, I returned. Standing before Martin's villa, my heart thundered as I rang the doorbell. The cold night air bit at my skin. My mind replayed endless scenarios, demanding answers, confronting him, or unleashing the fury burning inside me. When the door opened, Martin stood there, wine glass in hand, his features illuminated by the warm glow inside. His smug expression faltered the moment he saw me. "Victor," he said, his voice strained. "What are you doing here?" "You know exactly why I'm here," I said, stepping closer. "Where's Helena?" Martin gripped the doorframe tightly. Fear flickered in his eyes. "She's not here," he said, his voice rising slightly, betraying a hint of panic. "You're mistaken." I took another step forward, forcing him to retreat. "I followed her here last night, Martin. Don't lie to me." He tried to shut the door, but I jammed my foot against it. My anger boiled over. With a surge of strength, I shoved the door open and stepped inside. Martin stumbled backward, his composure crumbling. "You need to leave," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," I shot back. "Where is she?" His eyes darted toward the hallway, giving him away. I followed his gaze and saw a door slightly ajar at the end. His panic told me the answers I sought were behind it. As I moved toward the door, Martin lunged, grabbing my arm. "Don't go in there," he shouted. I shoved him off me, adrenaline surging. "Stay out of my way," I growled, kicking the door open. The sight before me was something I could never have prepared for. The door slammed against the wall, revealing a dimly lit room steeped in tension. The air smelled faintly of sweat and stale cologne. Helena sat in the corner, her arms tied behind her back, her mouth gagged. Tears streaked her face, smudging her makeup. The elegant dress she'd worn for client dinners was wrinkled and torn. Her eyes widened when she saw me, a flicker of relief breaking through her terror. "Helena!" I rushed to her, my hands trembling as I tried to free the knots binding her wrists. "What the hell is going on?" I asked. She whimpered through the gag, shaking her head frantically, as if to warn me. Before I could process a reaction, a shadow loomed behind me. Martin lunged, a heavy candlestick raised high. I spun around just in time, blocking the blow. The force reverberated through my arm. Adrenaline surged as we struggled. His face twisted with desperation. He was stronger than I had expected, his movements wild and erratic. "You shouldn't have come here," he growled, his voice laced with panic. I shoved him off, yanking the candlestick from his grip. My chest heaved as I stood over him, fury and disbelief clouding my mind. "What did you do to her?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "She wanted this," he spat, crawling backward. "She came to me willingly." "Liar." Helena's muffled scream cut through my haze, raw with pain. Her voice reignited my fury. Martin tried to flee, but I swung the candlestick, knocking him to the ground. He crumpled, groaning in pain. I turned back to Helena, untying the ropes with trembling hands. As the gag fell away, she gasped for air. "He was blackmailing me," she choked out, her voice hoarse. "He said he'd ruin my career, our lives, if I didn't come here." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. The betrayal I had imagined was nothing compared to the horror of reality. Martin wasn't her lover. He was her tormentor. Now, he lay unconscious in the gilded cage of his making. Helena clung to me as I called the police, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just unfolded. The operator's calm voice guided me, though rage threatened to consume me. Officers arrived within minutes, their flashing lights slicing through the night. Helena's story spilled out in fragments. Martin's threats, his coercion, the nights she spent trapped in his twisted games. Hidden cameras, compromising photos, and incriminating messages provided irrefutable evidence. When Martin regained consciousness, his face was pale, his arrogance shattered. As the officers cuffed him, he sneered. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with." "No," I said coldly, stepping closer. "You have no idea who you've messed with." As the police led him away, the house fell silent. Helena sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands. I knelt beside her, unsure of what to say. The woman I had doubted was instead a victim, ensnared in a nightmare neither of us saw coming. In the days that followed, the truth about Martin spread like wildfire. His arrest made headlines, exposing a web of other victims. He had used his wealth and influence to manipulate and exploit women, leaving shattered lives in his wake. Helena faced the fallout with quiet resilience. She resigned from her job, seeking therapy to process her trauma. Meanwhile, our marriage hung by a thread. One evening, as we sat on the balcony overlooking the city, she broke the silence. "Victor," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I failed you. I should have told you the truth. I was just so scared." I looked at her, the woman I had loved and doubted. "You didn't fail me," I said after a long pause. "You were trapped. But trust takes time to rebuild." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll do whatever it takes. We took small steps toward healing, but something had changed. The anger that once consumed me became a steely determination to rebuild not just our lives, but also to ensure Martin faced every consequence. Months later, I stood outside Martin's villa. Once a symbol of his arrogance, it now sat vacant, overgrown with weeds. His empire had crumbled. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But revenge doesn't fill the void left by betrayal. It doesn't erase scars. As I stared at the abandoned house, I realized my victory wasn't in Martin's downfall. It was in reclaiming my life. Helena and I eventually parted ways, not out of bitterness, but because we needed space to heal. She moved to a quiet coastal town, dedicating herself to helping other survivors. I stayed in Prague, rediscovering the passions that once defined me. One evening, as I walked along the Vltava River, I let it all go. The love, the pain, the betrayal, like fallen leaves carried away by the current. True justice, I realized, isn't about revenge. It's about finding peace. With that, I turned and walked away, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life.